There is a billion-dollar industry that depends on you not watering your garden properly. Every summer you drag out the hose, turn on the sprinkler, and pour hundreds of dollars on vegetables. Half of this water evaporates without touching the roots. In Lanka, they use sheep's wool by burying it directly into the soil around the roots of the plants. Wool holds 20 times more water than it weighs itself and releases moisture for weeks. Their gardens do not wither in August at a temperature of 32 degrees. The University of Vermont conducted controlled tests and confirmed the superiority of wool pellets over commercial fertilizers. Tomatoes in wool soil survived 14 days without watering versus 5 days in regular soil. Today we'll be breaking down the full 6-layer system, including a $5 clay pot older than the Roman Empire. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency states that up to 50% of home water is lost due to wind, evaporation, and runoff. A poorly configured automatic irrigation system wastes up to 25,000 gallons per year. This is not a flaw in the system. It's a system that works by design because a product that would eliminate your need for purchased water forever would be a terrible business. The residential irrigation industry exploded in the post-war suburban boom of the 1950s. Levittown's lawns and swinging sprinklers became symbols of the American dream. The average American family now spends more than $1,000 a year on water. This number has increased by 24% in 5 years. The Lancaster settlement is the oldest continuous Amish settlement in North America, founded in 1760. The families there were doing what they had always done, building soil so deep and alive that the earth itself became a reservoir. We stood in one of these gardens on a 90-degree afternoon. The soil beneath the mulch was dark, cool, and damp, and the dirt on the path 2 feet away was cracked and pale. The woman tending the garden did not water for 9 days. When we learned the science behind why it works, it changed the way we think about every hose and every water bill. The story of how science finally proved what the Amish knew from observation begins in an unexpected place. Dr. Taryn Bradshaw spent much of his career at the University of Vermont studying apples and grapes. Since 2016, he had heard one complaint from sheep farmers all over the state. The price of raw wool fell so dramatically that shearing cost more than the fleece itself. Some farmers literally burned their wool. At the same time, Vermont vegetable growers were spending thousands of dollars on imported organic fertilizers. Bradshaw saw 2 problems sitting next to each other and asked a question that no one else had thought of. What if one farmer's waste is exactly what another farmer needs? In 2020, he received a federal research grant from the Northeast SARE program, Project 120-358. He and his partner, Kimberly Hagan, set up controlled trials on 2 research farms in Vermont. They planted tomatoes and spinach in 3 conditions. One group received the standard commercial organic fertilizer that most northeastern growers rely on. The second group received wool pellets with the same nitrogen rate. The third group did not receive any fertilizer at all. The results were published in the journal Agronomy in May 2022, and they were unequivocal. Wool pellets performed on par with commercial fertilizer in all important areas: tomato yield, spinach yield, plant health, fruit quality. No significant differences between the 2 fertilized groups. Compared to the unfertilized control, the wool-treated tomatoes were 58 to 69% larger. Not marginally better, but dramatically better from the waste that farmers were throwing away. However, the yield data was only half the discovery. Soil moisture data told a completely different story. Wool is a keratin fiber with a structure unlike anything else in nature. The outer surface contains lanolin and waxy compounds that repel water, but the inner bark is made of sulfur-rich proteins that attract and absorb moisture at the molecular level. The result is a fiber that can hold 20 to 30 times its own weight in water. 1 pound of raw wool buried in garden soil can absorb and store 2 to nearly 4 gallons of water. This water does not sit in a puddle. It is trapped within the fibrous structure at the molecular level and is slowly released over a period of days directly into the root zone. As the surrounding soil dries, the wool becomes a battery for water. It charges when it rains and discharges when the sun comes out. The Pygor Breeders Association's wilt study tested what happens when you stop watering completely. Plants in standard garden soil began to wilt on the first day and died by the fifth or sixth day. Plants in soil enriched with wool pellets did not show stress until the seventh or eighth day and did not die until the 14th day. Wool doubled the window of survival not by adding more water, but by refusing to let the water go. Think about that number for a second. 14 days versus 5 days is the difference between a garden that collapses in the first week of missing watering and a garden that holds strong during a 2-week vacation in the height of summer. As wool slowly decomposes over 6 to 12 months, it releases nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and sulfur directly into the soil. Wool contains approximately 9 to 14% nitrogen, which is higher than most garden composts. Chicken manure, considered a premium source of nitrogen by many producers, provides about 4.5%. Wool almost triples this amount. You're not just storing water, you're feeding your plants at the same time. The reservoir also provides a slow-release fertilizer for 2 full growing seasons. This conundrum was not limited to American universities. Across the Atlantic in Oxfordshire, England, a young farmer named Eddie Morrow founded traditional garden growers based solely on memories of his grandparents. They have used raw sheep's wool in the family garden for decades, wrapping it around plants and mixing it into the soil. When Eddie studied agriculture at Harper Adams University, he realized that what his grandparents practiced out of instinct was backed up by real science. He developed a product called woolalizer, wool compressed into pellets, and began supplying it to local manufacturers, including Oxford University. The University of Reading carried out independent testing and confirmed that wool pellets improve soil structure, nutrient availability, water retention, and microbial activity. Professor Tom Sizemore, a soil scientist who led the Reading trial, said the results on soil health and water-holding capacity were the most interesting benefits. Eddie's grandparents were right, as were the Amish families in Lancaster County. There is a third benefit that almost no one mentions. Wool repels slugs because the microscopic jagged scales on the wool fibers create a surface that slugs refuse to cross. Gardeners in the United Kingdom who use wool mulch around lettuce, strawberries, and hostas report dramatic reductions in slug damage. One controlled study found that wool fabric almost completely eliminated weed growth and increased berry yield in strawberry plantings compared to herbicide-treated plots. The same material that holds water and nourishes the soil also builds a wall that slugs can't climb over. 3 functions, 1 material. Here's exactly how to use it in your garden. If you can find raw waste wool from your local sheep farmer, and in most rural areas you can get it for pennies or even free, tear it into loose clumps about the size of your fist. When transplanting seedlings in the spring, dig a hole an inch or 2 deeper than usual. Compact a layer of loose wool on the bottom about 2 inches thick. Place the plant on top, cover with soil, and spread another thin layer of wool around the base as a surface mulch, about an inch or 2 deep. For existing beds, tuck wool into the top 3 to 4 inches of soil between plants. If raw wool is not available, wool pellets are sold online and in selected garden centers. The recommended application rate is 1/2 cup per gallon of soil in containers or 1 pound per 10 square feet in garden beds. Scatter the granules around the base of each plant and water lightly. They will expand into a felt-like mat that retains moisture and repels slugs, slowly releasing nitrogen over the next 6 to 12 months. We started using raw wool from a neighbor's farm 3 seasons ago. The first summer, our raised beds held moisture noticeably longer between waterings. By the second season, we reduced the frequency of watering by almost half. The wool was still partially intact at the start of the third season, still holding moisture, still releasing nitrogen slowly into the root zone. The total cost was $12 per bag of waste wool, which the farmer was happy to donate. Compare that to what you spent on the hoses, sprinkler heads, and water bills to run them. This is the first layer of the system, and by itself it would already cut your watering in half. But the Amish don't stop at one layer. The second layer goes under the wool, into the soil itself, and the numbers here make the wool data look modest in comparison. The Natural Resources Defense Council has confirmed that for every 1% increase in soil organic matter, that soil holds an additional 20,000 gallons of water per acre. A standard 4-foot by 8-foot backyard bed is 1/32 of an acre. 1% more organic matter in that tiny bed means about 600 extra gallons of water holding capacity. This is enough to keep a small garden hydrated through a week of drought without adding a single drop from the hose. Most backyard soils contain between 1 and 3% organic matter. Amish garden soil, after generations of composting, cover crops, and manure application in the same areas, regularly shows 5 to 8%. This difference is not an abstraction. It's the difference between dirt that dries out in 2 days and soil that holds moisture for weeks. Every spring, Amish families spread 2 to 4 inches of compost mixed with horse or cow manure over their garden beds and work it into the top 6 to 8 inches. Every fall after harvesting, they plant cover crops: rye, clover, vetch. These plants grow throughout the fall and into early spring, and their root systems create thousands of tiny capillary channels underground that draw water deeper and distribute it more evenly through the root zone. When these cover crops are cut and planted before spring planting, they add even more organic material. Studies of microbial communities feeding on compost have shown that beneficial organisms create polysaccharide glues that bind soil particles into stable aggregates. This increases the pore space for water storage by up to 30%. Compost doesn't just add nutrients. It rearranges the physical architecture of soil at a microscopic level to trap more water in every cubic inch. This is not a one-year solution. It is a cumulative investment that improves every year. The first year you notice very little. The second year, the soil begins to darken and hold differently in the hand. By the third year, you are working with fundamentally different material than what you started with. Now combine this living soil with the third layer of the system, and you have something that borders on self-sufficiency. This is where it stops feeling like gardening and starts feeling like engineering a living sponge underfoot. Regenerative is a German word meaning hill culture. The Amish, along with German and Eastern European farming communities, have been practicing this for centuries. The concept is deceptively simple. Dig a trench 12 to 18 inches deep and fill the bottom with logs and large branches using hardwood such as oak, maple, or apple. Avoid black walnut, which produces toxins harmful to most garden plants, and cedar, which kills beneficial soil fungi. Place smaller branches, straw, compost, and aged manure on top of the wood. Finish with 6 to 8 inches of topsoil. As buried wood slowly decomposes over the years, its porosity increases and it becomes sponge-like. 1 cubic foot of partially decomposed hardwood can hold 5 to 10 times its weight in water. Oklahoma State University published a study confirming that Regenerative beds function as raised rain gardens. The beds are improved each year for 5 to 7 years as the wood decomposes into rich humus. Gardeners who build them tall enough, about 2 to 3 feet, report zero need for supplemental irrigation after the second year. One important note for the first season: new wood can temporarily pull nitrogen from the soil as microbes begin decomposition. Place additional compost and manure directly on the wood before adding topsoil. We built 2 Regenerative beds 3 seasons ago from oak and maple branches after removing a neighbor's trees. By the second year, we were watering these beds about once every 10 to 12 days, while our standard raised beds needed watering every 3 days. The fourth layer of the Amish system is the simplest, and it is the layer that most modern gardeners completely ignore. Never leave the soil exposed to the sky. A garden with bare soil between the rows is a garden bleeding with water. Sunlight and wind are the 2 greatest thieves of soil moisture, and bare soil gives them full access. Research confirms that beds without mulch lose 2 to 3 times more water to evaporation than beds covered with even 4 inches of organic mulch. The Amish never leave the soil bare. They plant densely using the Three Sisters method, where the corn provides support for the climbing beans. The beans fix nitrogen for all three plants, and the squash spreads its broad leaves across the ground like a living blanket. Between other rows of crops, they plant low-growing clover as a living mulch. 4 to 6 inches of straw are placed on top of this, creating a double moisture barrier that some gardeners say cuts watering by 2/3. The fifth layer of the system is where the Amish get their water from in the first place, and the math here will make you wonder why anyone with a roof and a downspout is still paying full price for garden water. Most Amish households use gutter systems on every roof, barn, and animal pen to catch every drop of rain in barrels, cisterns, or underground reservoirs. Some families have collection systems that hold several thousand gallons, fed solely by rain without any municipal connection. From these reservoirs, a network of simple pipes transports water only by gravity. No electric pumps, no pressure systems, no moving parts to fail. Kitchen gardens receive water from a faucet connected to a barrel placed several feet above the garden level, providing a slow, gentle stream that soaks directly into the soil. Some families even practice gray water recycling, redirecting water from washing vegetables or bathing back into their garden beds. The mathematics of rain harvesting is amazing. 1,000 square foot roof, smaller than most garage roofs, collects over 600 gallons from just 1 inch of rain. Pennsylvania receives about 42 inches of rain annually. This means that one modest roof provides over 25,000 gallons of free water per year. A well-maintained backyard vegetable garden uses approximately 5,000 to 8,000 gallons per season. One roof, a few barrels, and you have more free water than your garden can use. The Amish figured this out centuries ago. The rest of us paid utility companies to pump treated drinking water to our squash plants. Now comes the sixth and final layer of the system, the one we promised at the very beginning. It's a technique that's over 2,000 years old, costs about $5 to build, and may be the most satisfying change you'll make to your garden this season. This is called olla irrigation. Olla is an unglazed clay pot shaped like a round jug with a narrow neck. You bury it up to the neck in your garden bed, fill it with water, and put a lid on top to prevent evaporation. Porous clay allows water to slowly seep through the walls into the surrounding soil through a process called soil moisture tension. When the soil around the pot is dry, water is drawn through the clay walls. When the soil is saturated, the flow automatically stops. Plant roots grow toward the ollas and eventually wrap around the outside, receiving water exactly when they need it, and only as much as they need. This technique was first documented in the Qimen Yaoshu, one of the earliest agricultural scientific texts, written in ancient China around 533 to 544 AD. This technique has been used continuously for thousands of years in India, Iran, Brazil, and throughout North Africa. Research from the University of Arizona and numerous agricultural institutions confirms that olla irrigation reduces water consumption by 50 to 70% compared to conventional irrigation. Because the water remains below the surface, the weed seeds above never receive the moisture they need to germinate. You can buy specially made ollas online for $15 to $40, or you can make your own for under $5 with 2 unglazed terracotta pots from any garden center. Here are the exact instructions. Take 2 suitable 8 to 10 inch unglazed terracotta pots. They should be unglazed. This classic matte terracotta red without the shiny finish, because glazed pots seal the pores and won't let water out. Seal the drainage hole on one pot with a stopper or a drop of food-grade silicone. Let dry for 24 hours, then turn the second pot over from above so that the 2 rims meet. Apply a thick layer of waterproof adhesive or silicone along the entire seam where the rims touch. You now have a sealed clay lamp with 1 open drain hole on top for refilling. Dig a hole in the garden bed deep enough to bury the structure, leaving only an open hole at the surface of the soil. Fill around it. Fill with water from a hose or watering can. Cover the hole with a flat stone, terracotta saucer, or even a small plate to keep mosquitoes out and prevent evaporation. One large olla waters about a 3-foot circle, 4 of which cover a standard 4x8 raised bed. Refill every 3 to 7 days, depending on soil type, weather, and plant needs. A bonus that surprised us. Because olla delivers all the water below the surface, the top layer of soil stays dry. We installed 6 ollas throughout our garden 2 seasons ago. We went from watering with a hose every day to refilling the ollas twice a week, which saved us about 45 minutes of watering time per week. Our tomatoes, peppers, and zucchini have developed noticeably different root systems than any previous year. When we pulled out the spent tomato plants at the end of the season, the roots near the ollas grew deep and thick, wrapping around the clay like fingers gripping a handle. We went on a 10-day holiday at the end of July, filled every ollu to the brim before leaving, and came home to a garden that looked better than when we left. Not a single withered leaf, not a single brown stem. A $5 piece of clay, shaped as it was in the river valleys of ancient China more than 1,000 years ago, outperformed a $100 sprinkler system connected to a municipal water meter. Sometimes the oldest answer is still the best answer. We simply stopped asking the right question. Now let's talk about the habits that most of us have followed that the Amish approach completely dissolves. The first habit is watering on a schedule instead of watering on demand, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, regardless of what the soil actually requires. The Amish walk their garden every morning just as they walk it to inspect for pests, and they stick a finger 2 inches into the soil next to each plant. Wet, leave alone, dry, water deeply, then leave. They don't come back tomorrow. They don't spray lightly. They thoroughly soak the bed once and then let the soil dry until the finger test says otherwise. This practice alone reduces water use because most gardens are dramatically overwatered rather than underwatered. Overwatering suffocates the roots by filling the air spaces in the soil that the roots need to breathe. Deep, infrequent watering does the opposite. It forces the roots to chase moisture down into the soil column, where temperatures are stable and water reserves last much longer. The second habit is spraying water through the air. Sprinklers throw water upward where the wind steals the load before it lands, and what lands on the leaves where it feeds mold instead of feeding roots. The Amish water at the base directly onto the soil. This transition alone could reduce usage by 30 to 40%. A third habit is to leave the soil bare between rows because it looks neat. Bare soil under the July sun loses moisture at a rate that would shock you if you measured it. Mulch it, plant clover in it, cover it with wool. The Amish never leave the soil exposed. Even in winter, they plant cover crops that retain moisture and structure until spring. The fourth habit, the one that ties everything together, is viewing watering and soil building as 2 separate conversations. It's the same conversation. Weak soil with low organic matter cannot hold water. You can pour 10 gallons onto exhausted sandy dirt and watch 8 just run off. Build the same bed with years of compost, bury the wool in the root zone, add a hugelkultur wood core, mulch the surface with straw and live clover, and suddenly 2 gallons do what 10 used to do. You didn't find any more water. You have built soil that refuses to let water go. That's what holds this whole system together. A philosophy that runs through every aspect of Amish life. The Amish call it Gelassenheit. This doesn't translate easily, but it means something close to submitting to the natural order, trusting that the system has balance built into it long before we showed up with our monthly water bills. The woman who showed us the wool in her garden that August day said something that has stayed with us ever since. She said, "The soil wants to hold water. You just need to stop stealing it back." She was talking about bare soil, overhead sprinklers, constant shallow watering that keeps the roots on the surface. All the things we do that work against what the soil naturally does when left with enough organic matter and cover to function. She didn't lecture. She was describing something she had seen her grandmother do on the same piece of land 50 years ago. When you turn on the sprinkler throughout the garden, you are overriding the system. You saturate the surface, the sun bakes it, you saturate it again, the counter continues to spin. The Amish don't fight the water cycle. They participate in it, catching the rain as it falls, storing it in the soil itself, in buried wool, in decaying wood, in clay pots older than the Roman Empire. They cover the earth so that the sun cannot steal what the clouds have delivered, and they check with their hands, rather than with a timer, to know when the ground has had enough. Here's the complete system, all 6 layers in one place. Build up the soil every year with compost, cover crops, and aged organic matter, because each % of organic matter holds 20,000 additional gallons of water per acre. Bury the wool into the root zone and spread it on the surface, because nothing else you can get for free holds 30 times its weight in water while nourishing the soil and blocking slugs. Build at least one hugel culture bed with buried hardwood logs that act as a self-heating reservoir that improves over 5 to 7 years. Harvest rain from your roofs, even just with a single barrel on your gutter, because one modest roof provides more free water per year than most gardens can use. Plant densely, use living ground covers, and never leave the soil bare to the sun. Set up at least one $5 olu that waters a 3-foot circle for a week while you do nothing at all. The Amish have been doing this for 3 centuries. Dr. Bradshaw has proven the science of wool in a peer-reviewed journal. Eddie Mora's grandparents knew this only by touch and observation. The only thing missing is for you to build the system. If any of these have changed the way you see your garden, leave a comment and tell us which technique you'll try first. We read every comment. And if you thought the wool method was amazing, wait until you see what we cover next. There is an Amish technique of seed saving that allows families to grow the same variety of tomatoes for over 100 years. The taste is so superior to anything you've ever bought in a store that commercial producers have been quietly trying to re-engineer it for decades. This video will appear on the screen right now. Click on it before you forget, because it changes the way you think about every packet of seeds you ever buy. Thanks for spending time with us today. See you in the next episode.